And welcome to this meeting from the Interagency Coordination Group Against Trafficking in Persons. My name is Renata Delgado Schenk. I'm a cybercrime policy advisor at the UNODC. And I welcome you all to this webinar where we will explore the nexus between cybercrime, cyber-enabled crime, and trafficking in persons. As mentioned, is organized by ICAT in short, and this is the last webinar of a three-part series that have been taking place to increase our understanding of the nexus of trafficking in persons and other forms of organized crime. So today we have 7 panelists who are here to share their work. They have a lot of insights and practical recommendations that are directly tied to today's important discussion. So I will introduce them in a bit. For everyone to have a bit of a background on ICAT and the webinar series, I'm just going to say a few words about it. So as many of you already might know, ICAT stands for Interagency Coordination Group Against Trafficking in Persons, and this is basically a policy forum. It was established in 2007 by the United Nations General Assembly, and it was directed to enhance cooperation and coordination among UN agencies and other relevant international organizations for a coordinated and comprehensive approach to prevent and combat trafficking in persons. So ICAT provides a platform for, among others, exchange of information, exchange of experiences, and good practices, and of course, all around anti-trafficking efforts and responses. Today's webinar is a direct response to this objective. So the idea is that we exchange best practice, our experience, and the information we have around our responses. 31 member entities drawn from the United Nations systems and other international regional organizations currently form this entity ICAT. UNODC is the permanent coordinator and hosts the ICAT Secretariat. So our work draws from the membership and the expertise of its members. In 2025, this year, ICAT is co-chaired by both UNODC and OAS. So also welcome to our partner, the Organization of American States, who have set the agenda for this year, guided by the 6 annual priorities that align with the broad-based multi-year plan of action adopted in December 2020. So the webinar series of this year, 2025, it responds to the effort to build an evidence base on trafficking in persons and covers 3 important topics. They are diverse, but all 3 very important. First, the corruption ties to trafficking in persons, and this is the webinar that took place in early July, on the 2nd of July. The second topic that this webinar series covers is terrorism, firearms, and the link with trafficking in persons. This webinar we did late in July, the 24th, and now we are at the 3rd webinar series today, where we will explore, as I mentioned, the link of trafficking, cybercrime, and cyber-enabled crime. So this is the last one. And with all those 3 webinar series, what we aim is to gather policy recommendations and overall to strengthen the response to trafficking in person, particularly in relation to its link or nexus to other forms of organized crime. So having said so, now I'm gonna just share a minimum of house rules. Please given the number of participants and presenters today, we'll split the webinar into 2 segments. So we'll begin with 4 panelists, after which we will do a session for questions and answers. And then we will have the remaining 3 panelists, and we will have for them also a session of questions and answers. After both, we will do a closing. And so please, if you have questions, wait for the designated time after each section. You can also use the chat when we are speaking, and we'll continue to collect those questions. So also, because we're a lot in the room together, please remember to keep your microphone muted. This will help us when we share experiences and information. And if you want to ask in the designated time, please use the hand raise feature. You will see a little hand to use. So you will be invited to speak and to unmute yourself. If you don't want to speak, you can also write freely on the chat, and we will put the question for you as you feel it's better for you. So also, I would like to remind everybody that this webinar is recorded and that the recording will be published on the ICAT website. So after having said so, we're going to start with the first panel of discussion. I will now introduce our panelists, and before that, I kindly remind our panelists to conclude their interventions in time. We have a lot of interventions, so please keep to 10 minutes. And if you see me appearing in the screen, this means that you might need to start closing. So we will give you this sign first, and if we are too much into time, I will ask you to start concluding. So don't be surprised. First, our first panelist is Sylwia Gawromska. She's the Regional Program Advisor on Human Trafficking and Migrant Smuggling at our Regional Office for Southeast Asia and the Pacific. So, Sylwia, welcome today. There has been an upsurge of reports of trafficking for forced criminality into scam compounds in Southeast Asia. Would you like to share with us your insights on this important issue, how online scamming relates to trafficking in persons, and how technology has become a powerful enabler of this form of crime in your region? And if you can, we would really welcome your suggestions on how to better address this interconnection. So please, Sylwia, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and very good morning, afternoon, and perhaps also very good evening. Perhaps to all answer the question, I would share my presentation, because there are some interesting slides would hopefully give you a bit of an insight how technology is literally at the center of this form of trafficking and just generally organized crime. So I will just point that I'm drawing this information from our 4 really insightful and in-depth reports that I hope ICAT will be able to share with anyone who would like to read about it in more detail. So perhaps I will just start with reminding of the very, quite frankly, problematic complex of these forms of trafficking that is really intertwined with all different forms of organized crime. Of course, cyber crime, cyber-enabled crimes, but also money laundering, corruption, extortion, fraud, and others. And they all really are supporting one another, and technology is at the center of basically enabling almost every single element of that trafficking and in the context of transnational organized crime. So maybe a little bit more about how the technology is fueling these forms of trafficking. Some of the key features I would like to share with you is, number one, is that online recruitment, particularly through social media platforms, is still very much dominant form how the recruitment is taking place. So we see social media platforms being absolutely flooded with fake job posts. We also see use of different chatting platforms such as WhatsApp to basically spread the fake job posts. And basically, this is the problem because then communication starts in encrypted platforms, and very often criminal groups then erase all the evidence of basically recruitment process. We also know that the recruitment process, particularly when victims are coming from different countries, even different regions, looks extremely professional. So recruiters and brokers and networks are staging various stages of the process, making the recruitment looking extremely professional, companies looking extremely professional. They go as far as basically creating fake websites, impostoring different companies to show that actually they're running legitimate businesses. Once we have someone who has been recruited, we see that the travel is arranged, of course, with the help of online platforms, tools, brokers, recruiters. But we also know that the travel is surveilled. And this is very easily done because victims are often encouraged to share their location, put on the GPS pinning, and basically constantly be in touch with the brokers and the recruiters. So victims will not necessarily have opportunity to seek connection or seek support on the way. We also know that victims, once in a compound, oftentimes they might be resold to a different compound. And here its situation is that very often they use different platforms, including marketplaces like Telegram, where basically the different networks are competing for different profile of victims or different profile of people who are in the scam compound. It's an open, basically, platform to trade people. We also seen a lot of violence, extreme violence in the scam compounds that is oftentimes recorded, treated as a tool to blackmail victims. But also at the beginning, there was a moment where such streams of violence were basically put online as a form of additional income. And last, we see confiscation of documents and cell phones. Even when victims might get the phones back, we know that the phones are being highly monitored and surveilled in the scam compounds. I put a small photo next to. You can see that one device can be connected to hundreds of phones. And in this way, victims are controlled in a way that the contact with the outside world might be limited. Reaching out for help is obviously risky, and everything is heavily surveilled. And just to give you an idea what the scale of a problem we're dealing here in the region, I just put few examples how those scam compounds look like, because we do have smaller ad hoc sort of operations from apartments or smaller buildings, but the compounds, the scale of them is growing. Can you imagine the basically IT infrastructure that is required to support this level of industrial scamming? So those are scam compounds in various countries. Just to give you an idea that this is really require heavy tech support in able to make this operation possible. The bad news is that we're seeing expansion of these compounds. For example, the first two top photos show a scam compound extremely infamous in Myanmar. And you can see that in the 2.5 years, the compound has grown enormously. There was another compound also in Myanmar, and we can see that the infrastructure has been developed rapidly. And we also see that in some instances where interventions do happen, where governments are trying to react. And for example, in Myanmar, the power was cut off, internet was cut off. They start to basically rely on other technology like Starlink to bring the internet to those complexes. Those images are basically showing the developments in Cambodia. So other ways how technology plays a role in trafficking situation. We're seeing that victims are now also required to set bank accounts and use their own accounts to basically facilitate money laundering. To basically, victims are being used as money mules. So it's not only that the victims are being used and forced to engage through different technology platforms and different IA tools to reach out, start communicating with potential financial targets and financial fraud victims. But we also know that now they're being forced to use their own accounts to facilitate money laundering. And this is extremely problematic because it just adds to the list of potential offenses that victims are being entangled in. Another really problematic element that we are seeing, because as you can imagine, the cyber-enabled crime is particularly attributed to financial fraud, but we are also seeing cyber crimes coming out of the scam compounds and various attacks that have been attributed to those sites. And how this is happening is basically because the criminal networks are basically using different, more problematic cyber software such as RAS and MAS to basically hack into the software, into the system of all the computers to gain complete control. And this doesn't necessarily include just, of course, for financial reason, but can include other sort of problematic cyber crimes. And here I would like to show you how those programs actually work in practice, how they reduce barriers to entry, even if you have protections on your bank with KYC, know your customer, where you have to log in with your face, with your information. One link from those scam compounds can actually mean that they have a total control over your devices, including your passwords, and making and having ability to make financial transfer without even knowledge of the recipient of such a malware system. Moving on to other tools that we have seen being used, we obviously experience a usage of deep fakes that is particularly being used to impersonate a higher level sort of financial business persons to gain access to a sort of higher profit range. But on the video that you're basically seeing at the moment, this is the one of the software that is being used to basically impersonate someone, to obviously hide the identity. But you can see how in such a short period of time, you can choose to be anyone you want. And that software is being used specifically to change the features, but also to change the voice, ethnicity. So those software has been now used quite regularly in the scam compound to defraud, to commit all different cyber-related crimes. Another problematic aspect of the trafficking for forced criminality that is very much part of the transnational crime is the money laundering aspect. And we're talking here about a significant amount of illicit profit. From in this region alone, it is up to 37 billion in 2023, which obviously begs the question how those networks are able to launder this amount of money. So what we're seeing is basically technology is the key here. Again, is enabling not just basically gaining access to illicit funds, but to launder them, and they're doing it through either third service providers, through crypto trading, through different exchanges. But another example is Hawaiian Guarantee Group, that, as you can see, basically managed to process approximately between 50 to 100 billion dollars in transactions alone. And this is one of the biggest illicit online marketplace in this region, having 980,000 people. So we see this sort of tendency of accelerating use of blockchain and cryptocurrencies and trading platforms and exchanges to be able to avoid any kind of normal regulatory processes as you would have them in banks. So moving on to recommendations, I be very short, but I think we, at least in this region, we will have to start with really regulating casinos and online gambling and crypto exchanges, because they are very much part of the ecosystem of transnational crime. We're looking into developing, and we have to strengthen development of counter fraud tech tools, raising awareness among the governments of the spread and the spillage of this crime across different regions, increasing accountability of private sector and tech sector, fine-tuning trafficking legislations, and also increasing regional and international cooperation to address this problem more coherently, not just in Southeast Asia, but across the globe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you for your insights. It was really interesting to see that link so close in Southeast Asia, and to see the pictures of those scamming centers and the type of control that they can have through ICT means. Thank you for your presentation. Our second panelist is Among Resi, who is a program manager for the International Organization for Migration in Thailand. Among is at the forefront of assisting victims of trafficking in persons, and that they are identified in online scamming compounds and in neighboring countries. So Among, this will be your time. We understand that IOM has provided direct assistance to nearly 3,000 victims. And in your work, could you tell us what challenges have you observed, and particularly those that have lasting impact on victims, and how they are identified, supported, and treated? Please, you can take the floor.
Thank you, Renata. Thank you, colleague, for inviting IOM to share our experience from the ground. Yeah, I'm based in Bangkok and upfront for providing direct assistance to the victim from first criminality that's happening in Southeast Asia. So indeed that since 2022, IOM has assisted nearly 3,000 victims of trafficking trapped in online scam. We do support the government to provide screening and identification to those individuals, including providing protection services and also including return and reintegration for the victim, in close coordination with the country of origin, also transit country like Thailand, as well as the civil society organization on the ground. So in Thailand itself, actually just for the information, since early of this year up to August, more than 50,000 workers from scam center has been repatriated from Myanmar, following the rapid rescue from Myanmar, Thailand, and China government. So this is the data that we compile based on the screening process that we conducted to the individual. If you see that the trend has actually, it's happened not only in Myanmar, but Cambodia as well as Laos PDR. And based on the document or the screening process that we conducted, we found that Thailand is the major of transit country, followed by Malaysia and some in Singapore. This is for the Southeast Asia. But in the Middle East, we also see the United Arab Emirates as the transit country. And for the Africa nation, we found the Nairobi and also Ethiopia as the transit area. Following the mass rapid rescue in 2025, February 2025, we also seen the new modus where they are less using Thailand as the transit country, but more using Malaysia, and also they also in some extent they have direct flight from Malaysia to Yangon and then transfer to Myawaddy, and also Sun State. So this is the new development that we observed early of this year, especially following the rapid rescue in Myawaddy. If you see the nationality, we have, yes, of course, majority is also still from the Southeast Asia, but recently we also found more and more worker or victim from the African national. If in 2022, we only identify Kenyan national, but recently we also identified Ethiopian, Rwandan, South African, Burundi, Ugandan, Namibia, and others. And also more South Asian national also identified, not only Indian, but also Sri Lankan, Pakistan, Nepal, and others. And we also noticed there are increased number of Thai national actually who also trapped in the scam center in Cambodia and Myanmar. So we see that the situation is changes and also actually expanding not only in Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, but also Thailand, not only as a transit country, but also country of origin. This is the example that we gather from the IOM Myanmar screening analysis for this year. We see the top 5 nationality of the country of origin of a victim of trafficking. The first one is Ugandan, Ethiopian, Ghanaian, followed by Rwandan and Sri Lankan. But just a disclaimer that this is only the number that IOM receive and provide assistance. If we see the overall number that, for example, Thai government released based on the rescue process, Ethiopian is higher than Ugandan and Ghanaian. So this is really the number that IOM provide assistance. And in terms of the gender distribution, you see that the majority is on the 25 to 34 years old. This means that the productive age, and also social media platform. This is confirming what my colleague Sylvia has mentioned, that most of them are actually being recruited to the social media platform. WhatsApp is still the biggest number, followed by the Telegram and also Facebook. Interestingly, we also found that some of the victims actually being recruited through non-social media. It means they have direct communication or being recruited directly in person by their friends, their acquaintance, and or someone that they just knew in the casual conversation. But with this is also an indication that some of the victims actually, if we see the report from UNODC, for instance, they mentioned that there are requests from the company. If you want to be released, you need to bring someone else to replace your position. So this non-social media, 21% also indicate those type of recruitment. And the exploitations process or that we identified, most of them are actually exploiting for the dating apps. So they are being forced to commit forced dating, and also 25% actually for the cryptocurrency, 90% on other type cybercrime, and 2% on the gaming, and 2% on the e-commerce. This is the job that they are being forced to commit with. And also, if we see the forcing job that they're being offered, most of them mention that marketing and sales is the top job that they are offered. And I also would like to echo what Celia mentioned, that some of them actually, if in our data, 70% of them actually they are going through the recruitment process. So it's kind of legitimate job. Even at the beginning, I think in 2020 to early 2022, where Thailand still also imposing the medical requirement to enter to Thailand, all of this documentation is being provided by the company. So that's why the individual believe that this is actually a legitimate job in Thailand. And the challenge, because you've been asking what the challenge that we are facing. Actually, there are several challenges that we face on the ground. The first one is, sorry. Oops. Okay. The challenge that we found is also in terms of the limitations, misidentifications of the victims. That's still happening up until now. This is not only because I will say that some of the government doesn't really understand how to do the proper screening and identification process, and also the indicator of trafficking for forced criminality. But in another hand, it's also there are limitations from the government itself to do such a massive screening. For example, the rapid rescue that conducted by China, Myanmar, and Thailand, which is almost 15,000 individual, government of Thailand do not have ability to conduct full screening for all of them. And then they recommend the country of origin to conduct full screening, which we know that there are some gaps in the screening and identification process. This resulted in the barrier for the victim to access the protection services. The second one is the limited capacity and resources, including the absence of central data, like I mentioned, because there's no identification process, lack of the screening, there is no data sharing among the country. And also limited the consular representation. This is also what we are facing. It's prolonged the process for the rescue and the return process because the government required their country of origin to be present and to provide such verification, national verification. So without the presence of the consular, especially in Thailand, Laos as the transit country or destination country, this prolonged the process. And we saw also the prosecution gap, which is low level of the enforcement, although there are a lot of reports that have been published, including recommendation to strengthen the data sharing and investigation, but we still see very low number of the criminal justice process for this type of cases. And also with the focus to provide rescue and return, the almost investigation or victim cannot provide comprehensive testimony since the beginning to proceed with the criminal justice process. And then limited intra and cross-border cooperation. This is, I think, my colleague Sylvia also already mentioned. And another point that I want to highlight here is also the punitive immigration enforcement. If you see from the scam center issues or victims or workers who working in the scam center, most of them using, I will say, legitimate document to travel to Thailand, for instance. They're using visa on arrival or exempt visa. And then with this, when they're being transported from Thailand to Myanmar or Laos or Cambodia using irregular channel, when they come back or being rescued, the Thai immigration will just focus solely on that they are overstay in Thailand because they are entering Thailand, let's say last year, but they just return to Thailand when they are being rescued. So with that, then this also become issues for the protections of the individual. And the recommendation, I will just very quick here. I think in terms of the screening and identification, we really encourage the state to develop clear guidance to support the frontline officer in screening and identification process. UNODC has come up with the indicator of forced criminality, which is, I believe, can be adopted by country and then to support their frontline to do the screening at the province level. And then capacity at the frontline officer, including border officer on screening and indicator of tip beyond the document verification. It's important because we understood that the individual actually entering the country with the legitimate document rather than fraudulent document. And also try to link the victim to victim screening to the existing protection mechanism, such as national referral mechanism. And another one that I just want to really focus on is also on the prosecution gaps. I think it's really important to invest the specialized anti-trafficking unit and also establish a joint task force, including empowering VOT for the information and engaging survivor. It's also important because survivor will provide, will help the government to enhance their response, and also confine the dialogue on the link between protection and prosecution. It's really important. So yeah, I will stop here. And once again, I think I look forward to working with you as well. And it's really important, especially in the Southeast Asia region, it's also to integrate the case management system across ASEAN member states. So we will be able to provide immediate protection services, but also enhancing the prosecutions of the forced criminality. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this broad picture of what you have done and what it is still yet to be done at the level of victim support and attention in first response. So thank you. Thank you for OIOM for this presentation. Our third presenter is Dr. Marco Moggiani. He's a researcher at the International Center for Migration Policy Development, and he also serves as a lecturer at the Department of Development Studies at the University of Vienna. He's researching the intersection of borders, migration, and citizenship studies, and of course focusing on irregular migration, migration management, and migration aspirations for also decision-making processes. So Marco, the floor is yours, and we'll be hopefully seeing some of your recent assessment in Pakistan or the results of it. This assessment that you developed explored the growing use of online fake job adverts linked to trafficking in persons and migrant smuggling. Could you walk us through the key findings of this study and maybe highlight the specific improvements in Pakistan's legal and policy framework? Because this might serve as an example for replication elsewhere. So please, Marco, the floor is yours. Bear in mind the time, please. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Renata. Hope you can hear me well and see the presentation.
Yes.
Yes, as Renata mentioned, we worked on this project regarding mostly preventing online fake job advertisement, which facilitate irregular migration and trafficking from Pakistan. We look specifically at the connections between fraudulent job advertisement and migration-related crime in the country. We conducted literature review, policy analysis, and social media analysis. Of course, there are some challenges in this, and one of the main challenges is the not only that we couldn't interview victims, but we also were focusing on Pakistan itself, and so more research might be needed in countries of destination, and I will show you why. So just to have in mind a brief overview of the legal and political framework, Pakistan has a strong framework regarding outgoing labor migration. About 800,000 people per year migrate regularly to other countries. And over the past few years, it has seen positive policy changes in terms of combating or trying to combat smuggling and trafficking of migrants. But as you can see, as you can imagine, this kind of crimes have increasingly been connected to the online world. So over the past few years, online fraud, but also online fraudulent job advertisement connected to trafficking and smuggling have been developing online. So here is a brief overview of the legal framework. As I said, in Pakistan, the labor migration framework is really well oiled for decades. And in the past years, there has been regulations trying to combat smuggling and trafficking specifically, adopting international definitions and methods. Among the main findings, we found that the great majority of fraudulent job advertisements are connected with fraud. Often fraudulent advertisements tend to mirror the real ones, so it's very difficult even to get a picture of what is fake and what is genuine. The target of these ads, like most of the other labor ads, are young, low-income, low-educated, often unskilled and semi-skilled individuals, although in some cases even more educated people can be prey of these scams. And the aim of these ads in this case is to obtain as much money as possible from the victims, although they don't. Criminal groups don't ask for great amounts of money in order not to be detected, but they tend to ask for small amounts of money for each step of the operation. So, for example, for sending or for medical examination and for all the steps required to the process. Communication and payments in this case occur often via social media with no physical interactions outside the online environment. Other cases, although they are not very much connected maybe to labor migration or to labor ads, are the cases where online ads increasingly promote smuggling activities. In this case, we see a different modus operandi. So we saw how digital platforms can be increasingly used to promote these smuggling services. Routes tend to change or tend to have changed over the past years. First, land and their routes towards the Middle East and then Europe were most popular, but with increasing securitization of migration routes, the Gulf countries and Southeast Asian countries became more attractive. In this case, unlike the previous example, trust remains a fundamental component between the the agent and the job seeker, especially during the recruitment phase. And communication and payments in this case can occur also in person, but sometimes also online. Most dangerous are the cases where fraudulent online job advertisement actually lead to migration and lead to trafficking. And here is where violence and exploitation might intertwine with fraud. So in some cases, online fake job ads might be used to deceive the victims, to exploit their labor, to maybe to smuggle drugs across the border, or to ask their families for ransom. The journey usually can involve regular steps, although it's often done through visit or tourist or religious visas. And might involve also deception. So migrants might not be aware or fully aware of their legal status. Once again, we saw that this modus operandi tend to privilege routes towards Southeast Asia, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Cambodia, and so on. Instead of, for example, routes on Middle East and Gulf countries, which are more popular. Here we have more structured and more organized criminal groups, but they are also flexible and changing according to the circumstances. Once again, contacts and payments can occur mostly online through encrypted methods. One of the examples that we found in this case is so-called DAM-based visas. So in this case, criminal groups tend to sell a whole package, and they say to the job seeker that they might pay at the end of the process once they get the visa. In this sense, the agents can guarantee 100% that their visa application or the work application will get through. In this process, minimum documentation is required, and usually it happens in the span of a few weeks. The main destination for this kind of fraudulent job advertisement are usually the European Union and the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, but might also be the UK, Canada, and the USA. However, while agents tend to offer the whole package, actually they might require payments for some documents during the process or some other activities during the process. So the job seekers tend to pay something within or during the process, and the visa is often rejected. So I will try to conclude. What are the challenges in all of this? Well, first of all, it's difficult to understand whether fraudulent job advertisement aim to just defrauding people or might lead to actual migration, smuggling, or trafficking. And it's also difficult to prosecute because techniques are constantly changing, and also migration patterns are constantly changing. But above all, as I was saying at the beginning, it's impossible to distinguish the whole migration, or to distinguish, to understand what kind of crime you're talking about until we look at the whole migration process till the country of destination. So to conclude, I think it's important not only to ensure from the country of origin perspective a continuous evaluation and fine-tuning of the legal framework, but it's also important to strengthen cooperation and collaboration with countries of destination to promote regular labor migration in this way, and to develop knowledge and information sharing mechanism. But of course, we also think that it's important to promote further research in countries of destination to better understand the connections between online ads, irregular migration, and trafficking. Thank you very much for this. I hope I was on time, and I will leave you the floor.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this massive effort, Marco. Indeed, I mean, we stay with your last words of strengthening cooperation and increasing research on this. We need more data to understand better the flows, the trends, what is happening, and where does it begin, and what direction is following. So thank you for sharing these insights of your study. Our next panelist is also here. We have, for this first segment, we have Valentina Lopez Yañez. She's a project lead on technology facilitated human trafficking in the Office of the Special Representative and Coordinator for Combating Trafficking in Human, and it's part of the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Valentina is overseeing a project entitled Responding to Technology Facilitated Trafficking in Human Beings. So we're very much welcome your intervention here. Valentina, your project focuses on technology facilitated trafficking and particularly on the role of emerging technologies like generative AI. So based on your observations, what do you think are the evolving risks and opportunities associated with AI-enabled trafficking? If you can deal and deep dive into that, that will be really good. And if you can touch a little bit on how the traffickers are misusing digital tools to recruit and exploit victims, this will be really, really good. So Valentina, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for having me today. It's an honor to be representing the OSCE, and as indeed you say, you can see my screen, right? Yes. As indeed you say, I work specifically on an XB project that we have at the OSCE, which is the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. And my project specifically looks at responding to technology-facilitated human trafficking across all 57 participating states. And in my project, we look, for example, at developing the policy, but also the operational frameworks to deal with this crime. And in building these frameworks, we also look at emerging technologies. And we have been spending the last year and a half specifically looking at the role of artificial intelligence and concretely generative artificial intelligence. So as you ask, I would like to also look at the evolving risks.
Valentina, we don't see the presentation as a whole. So I don't know if you can change your settings so that we see the slide.
Or I can make it bigger to be able to see my notes, sorry.
No problem. Okay.
So when looking at the evolving risks, I would like to speak both about the modus operandi of the traffickers and also about how we're seeing the typology of human trafficking changing. So the first trend that we're seeing is the increase of the use of generative artificial intelligence and how it's impacting all throughout the process of human trafficking, from recruitment, control, but also the exploitation methods themselves. And last year with the Bali Process Regional Support Office, which is an organization based in Bangkok, we partnered with them to create a policy brief on the misuse of generative artificial intelligence. And I will paste this specific publication in the chat if anyone would like to see it as well. And among our findings, we found that large language models are being used to find victims, to start conversations, to build the trust, hand over to the traffickers, or extort directly within the chats. And as it was explained by our colleagues as well before in the presentations before by UNODC and IOM, we're seeing a lot as well the use of deepfake technology from everything from face swaps, but also lip syncing, voice cloning for the recruitment, but also the control and exploitation of the victims. And just yesterday, actually this week, we were having a webinar series that we had organized with this organization, the Bali Process, where we were looking at the intersection between generative artificial intelligence, but also with human trafficking. And we actually had a representative from the Thai police that was looking as well at the misuse of technology when it relates to scam centers. And they were telling us as well that they're seeing more and more, for example, the impersonation of police officers. So we're also seeing how deepfake technology is being used in every sort of exploitation and in every process. And when it comes to specifically generative artificial intelligence, one of the biggest trends that we're seeing in the OSCE region is when it comes to AI-generated child sexual abuse material. So in our project, we also deal with CSAM, and we're seeing that law enforcement is reporting a double-digit increase in AI-generated CSAM. But what is new is how accessible and realistic these tools are. They were tools that they existed before, but now they're really easy to use, and the materials that they create are increasingly realistic. We're hearing constantly from experts that it's getting harder and harder to differentiate from real material and from synthetic images. And not only is this creating challenges from law enforcement in the identification of the cases, but also in the prosecution and the legal steps moving forward. And in this webinar series that I was explaining that we carried out with the Bali Process just this week, we also had, for example, a UK prosecutor explaining one case where they were dealing with AI-generated CSAM, and they had the content that they could trace to real photos, they prosecuted under child pornography laws. But the synthetic content that could not be traced back to real images was only prosecuted under weaker prohibited images law. And we're seeing this trend as well, for example, in CSAM. We were also speaking with ICAT Sweden, an NGO, and they were telling us that in Sweden, they also find cases of AI-generated CSAM, which were also, for example, just classified as attempted child pornography because the images still had flaws in them that made them insufficiently realistic. So in our project, we're seeing that this phenomenon has raised evidentiary challenges and jurisdictional restrictions. And it has challenged really the way that all of our participating states are making sure their capacity to make sure that national laws keep pace with these technological changes. And the third evolving threat that we're seeing is one that was very well described as well by our colleagues from UNODC and IOM this afternoon, which is on the misuse of technology for forced criminality. And there's a lot of research on this already, but what was brought to our attention is the way that it is affecting OSCE participating states. So we see that these compounds, for example, are very much in Southeast Asia, West Africa, but it's affecting the OSCE in the following three ways. So the first one is that we find that a lot of nationals from OSCE participating states are the victims of these compounds. Particularly, we found that from at least 13 OSCE participating states, victims have been identified. The second way that it is affecting the OSCE is that in the latest Interpol report from a couple months ago, they identified similar modus operandi in the OSCE area, and they were pointing to Southeastern Europe. So we're seeing that the same modus operandi is actually being located in other regions apart from the ones we know within the OSCE. And the third way that it is affecting the OSCE is that the OSCE, its member states are being targeted for defraud. So last week, for example, we encountered an interview with a survivor, Kenyan survivor, who had been a victim in a Myanmar scam compound. And he was telling his story where he had been forced to use AI, concretely ChatGPT, to defraud US real estate agents in Texas. So we're seeing that the OSCE region is being affected in a plethora of ways. And in our project, we're really staying vigilant to see what is coming up. But in our project, we don't look only at the risks, but also we believe in the opportunities of technology, including artificial intelligence. So for example, we have been mapping technology-based solutions. So back in 2020 with Tech Against Trafficking, which is a coalition of technology companies, and we're part of this advisory, as an advisory board member to this coalition, we mapped 305 initiatives that were created by companies, NGOs, academia, using technology to combat trafficking. These tools were both from victim identification to awareness raising, supply chain monitoring. And I can also post this publication in the chat for you to be able to look into it into more depth. And this year we're partnering again with Tech Against Trafficking to look at specific tools, but on tackling labor trafficking in supply chains. And we will soon release this as well. So if anyone is interested, we're more than happy to share as well. And within our multiple mapping exercises of the positive use of technology, we're also seeing how artificial intelligence specifically is being used, for example, to predict trafficking hotspots, using historical trends and real-time information to disrupt activity before victims are even exploited. So for instance, just as an example, an NGO called Polaris uses AI to study hotline data and identify and predict trafficking patterns. And we're also seeing it being used positively in the identification of victims. So another example, for example, NICMEC, which focuses on child sexual abuse material, is partnering with an AI called Spotlight, which uses machine learning to scan large amounts of data of online content. And it was able to match a missing person's image to trafficking related material. And it actually led to the rescue, which was a really big success story, of a 14-year-old girl in Florida, and also it led to the arrest of its trafficker. But at the OSCE, we also have some concerns. So, for example, the special representative this summer went to Malta to a Council of Europe event, and there she raised the concern that, for example, for us, the privacy and of victim data is very important. So data should be properly encrypted and anonymized to ensure that the sensitive content and data of survivors is not exposed. And a good example of this, for example, is the Traffic Analysis Hub from Stop the Traffic, where they get data, both open source, but also data given to them by NGOs. They anonymize it, and then they're able to present on the patterns where the hotspots are in a map and in a visual way. So just to conclude, for us, AI and technology in general, as we see from other presentations, is part of the problem, but we also believe that it is part of the solution. And in the new publications that we're going to launch as well later on this year, we're going to focus on the positive use of artificial intelligence also to combat this crime, from NGOs and civil society, from governments, and from the private sector. And yes, that is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Valentina. It's really good to hear so much positive work also from the side of the OSCE and looking at technology both as a problem and as a solution, because it's not only a tool for crime, but it's also a tool to combat crime. So we're going to start now shorter questions and answers time. We will take some questions from the audience. If someone would like to intervene and put questions to our first 4 panelists, please do so. We've also, do we have some questions in the chat? Not yet. So I'm going to just put some questions to our panelists, because yeah, I mean, it was really interesting to hear about what they were sharing, and I will take them in order. So please, Sylvia, for you, can you share your view on what is the most critical element in upscaling a state response to the tech component in trafficking in persons cases? What does it need now?
Thank you. If I had to pick one, I would say that we will need to upscale skills of the law enforcement to conduct cyber investigations, to be able to investigate digital crimes being committed in digital space. Unfortunately, criminals are way ahead of us, and unfortunately, with the development of artificial intelligence tools and generative tools, machine learning, that sort of advancement is accelerating. And unfortunately, law enforcement is struggling to catch up. It's not just the advancement of the technology, but it's the volume of committed crimes online. So in my opinion, I think one of the things that countries should be looking into is scaling up the cyber skills, cyber investigation, and digital forensic investigations, and obviously sharing the information. We sitting on incredible data, but unfortunately, we oftentimes work in isolation. Countries work in isolation, and I think the power is if we start sharing this information to advance investigation cross-border. That also will lead to the prosecution, not prosecution just of traffickers, but also of third-party groups, including small or bigger, depends, tech software companies are actually working with the criminals, developing different tools. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia, for this important point. I mean, in fact, the majority of public officials have been trained based on physical analogic crime scenes. We have a crime scene now in cyberspace. We have digital data to be collected, to be seized, and there is not enough understanding to have the response that would be at the level of the crime phenomenon. So thank you for these insights. So have another question for Among. You were discussing how you were supporting victims, and I was wondering if you have any insights on the risk of misidentification of victims. Does this have any implication or impact in victims, the real victims' access to protection and justice?
Thank you, Renata. Indeed, that misidentification will exacerbating the situation of the victim. They are being criminalized, and also it's also violations of the non-punishment principle. I will say that. So many of the victims then wrongly charged, being detained and deported, and as such, then they cannot enjoy the protection, the right of protection that they should entitle, and misidentified when they are end up only being excluded from the existing protection services. It's also will lead into the ability of the investigator, law enforcement agency to properly identify, but also for the victim itself to provide more information, because they did not receive any psychosocial counseling, legal assistance, and so on. And also in terms of the return and reintegration, we also notice that when this being misidentified, then the successful of the reintegration process is also impacted, because victims tend to be returned with the stigma and discriminations within their community. They being labeled as the scammer rather than as victim of trafficking, which then hindering the successful of the reintegration process in the country of origin. So we will strongly recommend and encourage the state to really start to collect and doing the trauma-informed investigation and also screening process, because this is the key. If you want to really provide protection and also enhance the prosecution rate of the trafficking for forced criminality, so let's start with the proper identification and screening process toward the victim of trafficking, and to avoid misidentification to the victim. Thank you.
Thank you, Among. That's really, really important to say. We have a question in the chat for Marco. Here, one of the attendees is asking you if you do have any data being developed on the situation in Latin America.
Yeah, I was just replying to the. But yeah, thank you for this question. But unfortunately, we were focusing on Pakistan as a country of origin, so unfortunately I'm not aware of the situation in Latin America in this regard. Sorry.
No problem. Thank you very much. We have another question. There's Dorothea asking, do you have any insights into responses of the social media platforms as enablers for recruitment ads? I would invite any of you to have an answer to this. There is a role that the private sector is playing within the criminal phenomenon. So do you have, Marco, do you want to go on this?
I can. At the beginning, when I was showing the details of the research, I should have mentioned that we interviewed or consulted with many different stakeholders in Pakistan, including governmental representatives, civil society actors, and private sector, and so on and so forth. We also got in touch with social media companies, but we weren't that lucky, and we didn't get any reply from them. So what we know is I guess it's probably difficult for them to let's say to respond to this kind of issues in a timely manner. But yeah, unfortunately, we don't have any let's say response from their side. So what what can they do on this?
Thank you. I mean, I would add, now we have, for example, a new convention, the UN Convention Against Cybercrime. And in that, we have, for example, an article dedicated to the liability of the private sector when they participate, when they kind of enable criminal activity. And states have already agreed that they shall have an accountability framework, whether this is civil rules or administrative or a criminal framework for them. It is believed and agreed already at the level of the General Assembly that there needs to be accountability. And I think the general tendency of the countries that have been regulating in the last months and last years is going into that direction. We need to match accountability frameworks for the private sector and the accountability framework for the individuals under criminal law. So thank you for this important question. We'll take one question, the last one for Valentina. And Valentina, you are making a lot of work around cross-sectoral collaboration. What do you think is needed in that area, and how can we strengthen more to combat or to manage what you were mentioning in your presentation, that the tools are actually very much accessible? How does that impact into cross-sectoral needs?
Yes, thank you very much for your question. And from the OSCE, definitely we think that it's a multi-stakeholder answer, what we need to be focusing on, which involves the private sector, as was mentioned in a question, but also civil society, international organizations, and survivors themselves. Many times survivors are put on the sidelines or they're only consulted in the aftermath. And we think as well, for example, a recommendation for technology companies themselves is also to include survivors at the start of the process, not only when they're monitoring or encountering these problems online. And what we also think is that, okay, we focus on cross-sectoral and a cross-sectoral approach, right? But what do we actually focus on? And as it was mentioned by UNODC, for example, for us, data sharing is super important. These emerging trends really need to be studied, and we need to be raising the awareness of it. But also it was mentioned that we echo this recommendation is AI readiness. We need to be budgeting for these AI tools. We need to be building the literacy and building really the capacity of agencies, and also collaboration between the agencies, because many times the cyber units and the human trafficking units are not working together when it's one crime. And then as well, when we're looking at legal cooperation, so we really need to be looking at the laws and how they apply, for example, to technology facilitated human trafficking. And just to answer briefly as well, one of the questions in the chat in relation to South America. South America is definitely not a region within the OSCE, but we partner with South American countries through our cooperation with Interpol. And last year we carried out a hackathon where we were looking at trafficking routes from South America into OSCE participating states. And we were seeing more or less the same trends. The Telegram channels being misused, WhatsApp communication as well, the recruitment through social media platforms. However, this hackathon that we carried out, we were mostly looking at sexual exploitation. And in the hackathon, for example, we identified Brazilian victims. So definitely we see it interconnected and the same platforms being misused. However, in each country, we do see specific platforms being used more or less, as it was commented as well in another presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those insights. Thank you to all our panelists of the first part. Now we're going to move to the second part of this webinar series. And for that, we'll have 3 presenters. Again, I would like to remind our panelists to conclude their interventions within 10 minutes. Just be very to the point, and we can go more in depth into the questions, please. So first we have Afros Kaviani Johnson. He's UNICEF's global thematic lead for addressing technology-facilitated violence against children. Afros, digital technologies have created new avenues for trafficking in children and expanding the reach of criminal networks. UNICEF's guide on legislating for the digital age underlines the need for for law reform in the face of new digital threats. Please, can you tell us what key elements should legislation include to align with international standards? And could you let us know how an effective response to child trafficking and exploitation in the digital era looks like? If you can address those questions, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Renata, and thank you for the invitation for UNICEF to participate in this super important discussion. I think Valentina's intervention at the closing of the last segment really set a good scene for what I will cover in 10 minutes or less. So to answer your question, I'm just going to break it into 3 main parts. So firstly, speak to how legal frameworks fit within a comprehensive response and UNICEF's approach. Secondly, I'll just signpost, I'm sure you're all familiar, but let me signpost those key international legal foundations that should inform national legislation. And finally, also signposting, because time is not enough, but those key elements that legislation should include. So let me just say, I am going to focus on child sexual exploitation, specifically not covering the whole gamut of trafficking in children. So to start with, I just wanted to put this on the screen. Some of you may be familiar with this. This is a model national response framework that's been developed by the We Protect Global Alliance. It's specifically a public-private alliance that comes together to address the phenomenon of online child sexual exploitation and abuse, which obviously intersects with trafficking for sexual exploitation. So here, their model national response makes it very clear that legislation is an important part of this response. As we all know, legislation can and should define criminal offences. It also gives authorities power to act, so not only law enforcement, but social services, border control, all those relevant authorities. And it can also, specifically when we're talking about that intersection with digital and cyber enabled, it can also hold companies accountable. But what we see is, of course, in many countries, if not most, that rapid digital growth hasn't been matched by legal reform. So there are gaps in laws that leave that traffickers and abusers exploit. So I just wanted to put this here so we put the conversation in context of a whole comprehensive response that we need at national and then transnational level. Secondly, I just wanted to draw out this quote from the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child. Obviously, establishing strong laws to protect children in relation to cyber-enabled crimes is actually a legal obligation. So it's not just an optional reform that we need, but countries need to do this in order to fulfill a binding obligation to protect children from harm, and that includes harm facilitated by technology. Key international frameworks, obviously we have the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and its optional protocols, specifically and most relevantly the one on the sale of children, ILO Convention on the worst forms of child labour, obviously the Palermo Protocol. Council of Europe also has a number of relevant conventions that are open for ratification beyond the Council of Europe. And then, as has been signposted by Renata, the recently agreed UN Convention against cybercrime. There are also other regional instruments, the African Charter on the Rights and the Welfare of the Child, amongst others, but these give us the legal foundations that need application at country level as well. So when we look at key elements that need to be included in legislation, obviously the criminalisation of child sexual abuse materials, and that includes both real and synthetic content. So speaking to the challenges and the growing trends that we're seeing with respect to AI enabled CSAM. Also, as was noted, this is a major gap in many jurisdictions, and it's really important to re-emphasize that even if no child is involved, the harm is real. So this kind of content is promoting the sexualization of children, it's fueling demand, and it's causing harm to children whose likeness is used. So we really do call for laws to criminalize this content. I also want to signpost another issue that often comes up with respect to child sexual abuse materials, and that's the self-generated nature of some of this content. So I want to emphasize that the international guidance on this is clear. Children should be treated as victims and not be held criminally liable for producing images of themselves. Moreover, the Committee on the Rights of the Child has been very clear that a child should not be held criminally liable for the generation, possession, or voluntary and consensual sharing of sexual content of him or herself when it is solely for their own private use. So this is a really important point to emphasize. As well as child sexual abuse materials, obviously the online grooming and other elements must be criminalised. Another important thing to note is the removal of statutes of limitations on child sexual abuse crimes. So as everyone will know, the statute of limitations refers to the point at which and the time from the period of the commission of an offence after which a suspect cannot be prosecuted. We know that many children, child victims and survivors of sexual abuse are unlikely to report a crime, and often they only do that, if they do that, it's many years after the offence has occurred. So for these reasons, the committee recommends that states avoid establishing a statute of limitations in respect of offences that fall under the optional protocol on the sale of children. And then the next point, just to emphasise at a very high level, is the need to update procedural laws for digital evidence. So obviously there needs to be new protocols, new standards with respect to the investigation, storage and preservation of electronic evidence. Law enforcement have to be equipped with the designated referral points, specialised investigation units, and secure chain of custody procedures. I also want to point out, and there has already been discussion about corporate liability and the role of businesses. I want to point out here the UN guiding principles on business and human rights, which make it clear that companies must respect human rights, and in the context of my presentation, allow me to focus on children's rights. So what is necessary and what the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child has been explicit about is that laws must require child rights due diligence and in particular impact assessment, so that we can assess the impact of company activities with respect to children's rights. The committee also talks about very high standards of transparency and accountability, and I want to signpost some work that UNICEF is currently doing with respect to tech regulation for children's rights and safety, which will be forthcoming in the coming month or so. And then really important when we're talking about protection, it's not only the offences, it's not only the procedural aspects, but that full ecosystem of support. So Article 39 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child mandates recovery and reintegration for child victims of trafficking, exploitation, abuse, and so on. And so what this necessitates and what does need to be provided for in the law are child-friendly justice processes where the children are in contact with the justice system as victims or as alleged perpetrators. It requires training for professionals. It requires coordinated and multi-sectoral victim support services, and of course, redress mechanisms and financial compensation for victims. Just as important as all of these things that may be in the law or in secondary legislation or in operating guidelines is focusing on implementation, so operational guidance, education, and sustainable resourcing. So coming to the end, really there is that need to update criminal laws to address tech-facilitated trafficking and exploitation, to hold companies accountable through regulatory obligations and in some cases criminal offences, and of course to ensure child-centred justice and support. Much of what I've covered is actually in this global guide that we published a couple of years ago, which now needs updating, but the core of it is there, and I invite you to consult that for more information. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those insights. And I replicate your mentions of the need to have an updated procedural framework, because there's no way we can prosecute crimes that are related to the misuse of technology if our procedural laws do not allow us to operate in that environment. And for that, we're grateful now that we have, for example, new standards under the UN Convention Against Cybercrime. We have a whole chapter on that, which is applicable and usable already for cases of child sexual abuse material, for cases of trafficking in persons, or any other crime that is cyber enabled, because that's the beauty of it, that the standards are well applicable to any type of cyber-enabled crime. So thank you very much. Thank you for your intervention. Thank you to UNICEF for being part of this effort. So now we move to our next panelist. And with us, we have Katia Vera. She's a senior officer in the cybersecurity section at the Inter-American Committee Against Terrorism of the OAS, so the Organization of American States. Her section supports member states of this organization in preventing, identifying, responding, and recovering from cyber incidents. And they're doing a really great job. So, Katia, based on your experience, what forms of criminal activity have you observed being committed through the abuse of technology in the region of the Americas? Do you see any common methods that are used by criminal networks, and any that would be prevalent for the human trafficking context? The floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Renata, and thank you very much to all the organizers. I'm going to share my presentation, and if someone could confirm if it's
yes,
visible.
We can see it.
Perfect. It looks like a very big presentation, but I promise that I will stick to the 10 minutes that we have for this first section of the webinar. Well, thank you very much, first of all, for the invitations. And when we received the invitation, I think we agree that there are, let's say, there's not a lot of data within the region, and I'm going to go deep into that in a bit. But then we understood that before going into what's happening in the region and what has been done, it was important to center the discussion because we work, as you were mentioning, with cybersecurity through the OAS member states. So like illustrate as a framework the main linkages between cyber-enabled trafficking in person with the cybersecurity. And this is because it has been how it has been understood. It's in silos, more or less. And we've been working with a traditional understanding of cybersecurity that is probably missing some of the human aspects in these protections of the system. So I'm going to go through there in a very quickly, and then I will tell you a little bit of what we're doing, how this link between cybersecurity and trafficking in person has been dealt within the region, and then some ideas of how we can move on with the things that we already have. Very briefly, to position myself from where I am speaking from. As you were mentioning, I work in the cybersecurity section of the OAS, which is the section that helps the OAS member states to build technical and cyber and policy level cybersecurity capacities. And we are housed within SICTE, and we're a big team, almost 21 members in the team, spreading, let's say, technical assistance across the 22 countries. And working, and this is important because it's an approach that we have to topics such as human in person. We work in different pillars. So we provide policy technical advice on cybersecurity, technical assistance. We also do research because, as we were saying, sometimes the data is not there. And we also work on capacity and talent development. But then also, very importantly, we have a cross-cutting gender diversity and inclusion lens, which helps us understand which are the specific cybersecurity needs that people face, considering, for example, there's social position, gender, income. And let's say one of the highlights is that we coordinate what we call the CSIRT Americas network, which is a network of government cybersecurity incident response teams that are composed of people who specialize in detecting, responding to, and mitigating cyber threats. Which is there, and you could see 479 specialists in 52 CSIRTs and in 22 countries. So this is a huge network that is helping to do cybersecurity threat intelligence. But the question here is, with this unique network that we have that is working, it allows the exchange of information 24 hours on cyber threats and cyber attacks as well. It's like, where are we locating, for example, crimes related to trafficking in persons? And then the problem is, as I was saying at the beginning, that it's central cybersecurity for combating human trafficking. It's not just an add-on, but somehow it has been worked in silos. But I mean, we keep saying within our team, trafficking is not only a crime issue, because it can be boxed like that, but it's also a cyber one. And I'm not going to go again and with the other presenters' positions today mentioned, but we know that they are the technology over there is at every stage. Recruitment happens through social media, control is exercised through malware, surveillance apps, and then there are profits that are laundered digitally, often with cryptocurrency. So we need to understand in a different way, let's say, the cybersecurity domain. And I'm insisting in this because, as you could see over here, there has been a traditional understanding of cybersecurity, and it was quite heavily focused on the protection of the system, the information in the systems, in the cables, let's say, But then there's been a move, and we could see that specifically in the Latin American region. There's been a move to move to a human-centric understanding of cybersecurity, and as the OECD mentioned, understanding cybersecurity as a broad and multifaceted domain, which involves indeed technical operations, but also economic, social, personal activities that rely on this digital environment. Obviously, criminal law enforcement, and this is where we're connecting, but national, regional, and international security, and all this is interrelated. So we cannot anymore just be relying in the information security, in the data security, but understanding cybersecurity as this whole domain. And that's the new approach is the one that we've been pushing forward within the region, is understanding cybersecurity through a human-centric approach, placing individuals, communities at the center, as I was saying, not only the cables, and focusing on protecting vulnerable people, populations, their digital identity, the accounts, the communications through which they are being abused, and obviously, as I was saying before, with a gender, with an intersectional perspective. And this, for example, involves secure anonymous reporting channels for survivors, which often are not considered when we are in these discussions about cybersecurity. It was mentioned before, trauma-enforced evidence collection that respect privacy, but also aware campaigns tailored to migrants, women, youth, and more specific, more importantly, I think, and this whole equation is building capacity building of the cybersecurity professional with this human-centric approach. Because it's there, and then we cannot avoid anymore to say just focusing the cybersecurity teams in cyber threats to directly to the system. We have to consider now the people there. And understanding also that cybersecurity professionals and those systems are essential for preventing, detecting, disrupting, protecting, and that moves us to the. I'm gonna go to this link, and then what can we move from here, and what are we saying? Over here the mapping of how the trafficking activity goes, common control, exploitation through digital tools, and then that becomes a cybersecurity risk. So we're promoting an understanding of how the CECIRT, and specifically I was mentioning that in the first part of my interpretation, could detect and then provide that information to law enforcement, and then from there create policies. Oh, sorry. I don't know, something happened to my presentation. Can you see it?
We can see it.
Yeah.
Now it's moving, yes.
Okay.
If you could start wrapping up.
Yeah, I'm gonna go there. I wanted to say that because through our threat intelligence that is putting forward from the CECIRT Americas team, we detect regularly compromised sites, compromised emails, link credential, critical infrastructure. You could see over here what we've been reported. And sometimes there is in this threat analysis information of trafficking in person, how online recruitment growth, sex trafficking, online sexual exploitation, child exploitation. But then it seems that we're missing a link to improve the cyber threat intelligence to overcome the specific cybersecurity challenges that we're facing in the region, and obviously the challenges that are involved in addressing the human trafficking. How can this be done? We work in the region through national cybersecurity strategies, which are like the roadmap of the policies on cybersecurity. The component on cyber trafficking has to be there, and we've been moving towards there. There are countries like Chile, Uruguay, Costa Rica that now has this human-centric approach to cybersecurity. And providing, for example, digital literacy and resilience with cybersecurity awareness campaigns targeting vulnerable communities, doing cybersecurity by design that consider women, because it's not done right now like this, considering women, children, and migrants, prioritizing platform design to prevent grooming, and like most importantly, I think victim-centered standards and response. Because in the protection of the victims, we have to be aware of their identities, their privacy, and that's even it's as important as prosecuting criminals. And that can be done. Let's say, at least in the region, we've been, as I was mentioning, working hardly in creating this CECIRT network, and we can strengthen, with this understanding of human-centered cybersecurity, strengthen the network to be more proactive in detection and using AI, as I was mentioning above, but also reporting the channels to flag emerging trends linked to human trafficking. And importantly, to understand also the financial and the crime convergence, because we've seen important, for example, increase of cryptocurrencies, which gives trends of possible crime activities in the region. With this, I'm finishing, and we can go deeper in the question. So we already have, at least in the region, this opportunity settled by the CECIRT network. But then from there, how can we support through the network to human trafficking efforts? With that, I think I passed my time, so I will stop here.
Thank you, Katia, for this link between different forms of crime and cybersecurity, and how important it is to secure the infrastructure that is related to where actually crime is being committed. So thank you very much for this. We'll go to our next panelist, our last one for the day. Our last presenter is Gaia Mantini. She's an expert at the Terrorism Prevention Branch here at our house in UNODC. And here she has supported the UNODC Global Initiative on handling electronic evidence across borders. And so, Gaia, based on your experience and work, can you please share with us how electronic evidence can bridge the disciplines, how electronic evidence is so crucial on any type of crime that is related to technology? Please, if you can take the floor, the time is all yours.
Thank you, Renata, and good afternoon to everyone. Well, we heard many substantially advanced and well-structured interventions from colleagues of ours, and where has been highlighted how trafficking in person is meeting new opportunities as organized crime adapts to the digital area. Building on those interventions, today I try to provide a different angle to approach the topic, focusing on the role of digital evidence. And I will try to respect, of course, the time allocated. So it is important to start by stressing that cyberspace is not merely an additional tool, but has become an integral environment for trafficking, transforming how this crime is perpetrated and how we must respond to it. Trafficking in human beings has indeed transformed into a new business model. So today we have online platforms that have lowered the barriers to entry, allowing traffickers to identify, approach, and manipulate victims with unprecedented speed and reach. And what once required physical control and territorial dominance can now be managed virtually through can now be managed, of course, virtually. So through deceptive job offers, through grooming over social media, and the use of encrypted apps to maintain coercion and at distance, while, of course, before it was, I'm sorry, I would like to, the chat, okay. So this shift has multiplied opportunities for offenders while compounding the vulnerabilities of victims, especially women and minors, and has made detection, prosecution more resource invasive and technologically demanding. So my work with the UNODC Global Initiative on Handling Electronic Evidence Across Border has shown that we urgently need a structured methodology, one that identifies, preserve, analyze, and transfer digital tracers across jurisdiction. And when we are speaking about digital data, they are not abstract. So they include social media conversation, chat logs, phone metadata, IP address, timestamps, geolocation data, payment records, device identifiers, online advertisement, and live streams, and so on. So whether in trafficking, terrorism, or online fraud, offenders exploit the same platform, while investigators around the world, they confront the same barriers to a lawful access to this data. So a shared methodologies ensure that these fragile footprints are transformed into admissible, actionable evidence that can stand court and so deliver justice and arrive to adjudication. Technologies amplify the commercialization of exploitation. So adult service website, encrypted apps, and online classified ads gives traffickers direct access to clients, enabling them to replicate advertisement across multiple platforms and maximizing the profit. Coordination of services is often managed remotely, with cases of sexual exploitation that are even live streamed to paying audience. So financially, while cash remains dominant, there is actually a growing reliance on fintech services, prepaid cards, and digital wallets to conceal proceeds. The use of cryptocurrency in trafficking in person cases is still limited, at least it's my experience and my knowledge, but emerging evidence of traffickers engaging pro-crypto traders and mixers are mirroring what broader other like cybercrime trends are out there, pointing to developing this crime as a service ecosystem. And each of these practices leaves a digital footprint. So advertisement, chat, emails, geolocation data, financial transactions, when they are properly preserved and analyzed, such element, part of the crime, they can become evidence and can expose networks of traffickers, clients, and protect victims. Yet, of course, detection remains a challenge, an international challenge. The sheer scale of online activity is overwhelming. Perpetrators hide behind pseudonymous anonymization tool, encrypted channels, and illicit exchange increasingly take place in closed group, resisting to monitoring and difficult to be geolocated due to VPN services. Compounding these challenges, many states lack of specialized unit or technical expertise, leaving investigators dependent on overburdened cybercrime centers, and this creates bottleneck in the investigation, delays, or concrete obstacle in the adjudication. So the transnational nature of the electronic evidence adds another layer of challenges. Data is often stored abroad, in a service provider that is located in a foreign jurisdiction, so requiring mutual legal assistance that are slow and ill-suited to the piece of the cyber-enabled trafficking. As law enforcement improve its use of digital forensics, traffickers continuously adapt, exploiting new apps, encryption methods, marketplace, and the result is a constant race in which authorities risk to be behind one step all the time. So here lies the critical importance of electronic evidence. They are transnational, they are fragile, they demand both technical expertise and legal harmonization. My team works focused precisely on these cross-border issues, ensuring that the trafficking in-person investigation can leverage digital footprints effectively and lawfully. So in a recent case, investigators uncovered a network exploiting women across multiple jurisdictions through online advertisement and adult service website. Victims were recruited with fraudulent job offers and subsequently controlled through threats to release intimate photos. The investigation relied heavily on electronic evidence, so chat records, geolocation data, online ads, etc. And yet the data was stored on service providers located abroad and under stricter law, privacy law. So requesting for access through MLA faced long delays, during which during that time critical content was deleted, because of course there's also to deal with retention law and the time providers retain a data, so a time a data actually exists. Some evidence was encrypted, and this also required additional technical expertise and specialized tools. When the case reached court, prosecutors struggled with admissibility as procedures for collecting and authenticating digital evidence varied across jurisdiction. So cases like this underscore exactly the need for a structured methodology to address electronic evidence in trafficking in-person investigation. How? Firstly, mapping the digital landscape. What does it mean? It means identifying the platforms traffickers use, from social media to encrypted apps, and understanding the legal regime governing data that are located in another jurisdiction. Building trust and cooperation, of course, cultivating partnership with service providers, technology companies, while enhancing collaboration among law enforcement, civil society, and regulators. Developing technical expertise, so equipping investigators and prosecutors with the skill to identify, collect, preserve, and present digital evidence. This requires both, as also was mentioned from the previous colleague, cyber literacy for frontline officer and specialized technical expertise within dedicated units, and for promoting legal harmonization. So, of course, advancing shared framework for data retention and evidence sharing. So moving from, let's say, an ad hoc bilateral agreements towards a common international standard can be an essential step to secure cross-border cooperation. So applied to the case, such a methodology would have expedited access to trusted relationship with the service provider, ensure proper handling of presentation of evidence through trained prosecutors, and preserve data loss through harmonized frameworks. Of course, also the part of the harmonization of the law, it's very important. We could speak for hours. It's not the case now because, of course, if we strengthen and foster our relationship with service providers, but then the data received voluntarily disclosed by the service provider is not admissible at court, we then need to have MLA anyway, and the process is still long. However, these steps needs to be done at the same time. So while the case, this case, it's of course a fictional case that serves the purpose of highlighting these challenges, it reveals systematic vulnerabilities and the fact that the methodological approach can help overcome. So crucially, to conclude, this methodology is not confined to trafficking in person. Indeed, it started and it was created, weren't conceived, etc., under the frame of countering terrorism. But indeed, it applies across crime type where technology is central and abused, from terrorism to trafficking in person, smuggling of migrants, fraud, etc., reinforcing the need for systemic rather than crime-specific solution to electronic evidence. So now I will pose a question. Just now, this reality leaves us with an urgent question. So if traffickers can so easily operate across borders and exploit the digital environment, how can we ensure that our justice system are equally agile, equally connected, and equally capable of acting across border? Ultimately, this is not only about keeping the pace with technology, but about safeguarding also, of course, victims. Other colleagues more focused on these points, which is at the same time, of course, absolutely important, and ensuring that electronic evidence, but the point is that ensuring that electronic evidence become a pathway to protection, ensuring that electronic evidence can be shared and be admissible at trial to reach adjudication. It can be a pathway to protection and accountability, and this is for us where the way forward lies. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gaia. Thank you for your insights. And indeed, there's There's no use if we can collect and extract evidence if it's not admissible at court. It has no use. So thank you for that. We have now finalized the part where we were sharing the information through panelists. We will start a short questions and answer period. Please, panelists, if you can just turn on your cameras at the same time and we can see you all. We have a couple of questions from the chat. And I would like to put first a question to Katja. In the chat, they were asking, what is the OIOS doing to help victims' countries of origin, and how can it punish or force the receiving country to prevent this type of trafficking? If you can address this question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Renata. First of all, I need to say that I'm here focusing on cybersecurity, right? So we've been, as I was mentioning before, within the section where kind of promoting this understanding of human-centered cybersecurity when creating policies around like the people working on the policy, on creating the policy and implementing the policy to have this human-centric view. Then we're trying to promote to work with what we have, this CESIRT monitoring, threat intelligence monitoring, where we already identify malware, attacks to critical infrastructure, leaks, so it's there working. But then we also need to move to understanding the trends, with this new vision. Now that we are analyzing, let's say, doing threat intelligence, but also with a focus in the people, we need to create data because there's not enough data in the region. We know, for example, that cam industry is getting a worrying trend, but also cartel-related human trafficking. But I have to say that there's a limited published data on what is happening. We know that there are the same trends, but the report that we have, I can, in this isolating approach to cybersecurity and trafficking of human persons. So this is something to be worked on. We're proposing this new approach to do it. And then I saw a question there about terrorism, which is like, how are we connecting the dots? What we've been seeing, and I mentioned before, is the crypto transaction volume that it has been go higher and higher through the years, and that is a critical understanding from crime organized groups in the region, and there can be their links to human trafficking, but we still don't know because we don't have this structure set in place to exchange information between cybersecurity professionals and law enforcement in an efficient way, let's say. So this is something that we need to work on, and obviously we welcome these spaces because it helps us come to a different dialogue with people working on human trafficking rather than just speaking with cybersecurity professionals, which is something that we often do. With that, I'll stop.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that remark. Indeed, there needs to be a closer link between cybersecurity and cybercrime. And for example, at some parts of UNODC, we are working on that in the Americas. And the global program on cybercrime is doing particularly that. We're actually training the officials of the national computer emergency teams to be also part and to know the standards of first responders when they collect and they deal with digital evidence. Because of course, if there is a cyber attack, if there is cyber criminal activity that they are involved in and they don't take the actions that are related to criminal response, then there cannot be a criminal response. They're losing a lot of evidence. So thank you for that remark. We also have a question in the chat for Gaia. Many digital footprints are not concrete, but only used for a specific purpose, and the criminals may use multiple barriers to evade detection to achieve their goal. How does coordination between stakeholders become a challenge when the criminal has used the chain only once. I believe they're asking about different types of digital evidence and how does coordination play a role there?
Thank you for the question. Well, digital are not, sorry, excuse me, I just missed, I use, okay, to the coordination, it's fundamental, of course, if there are many providers that collaborate with law enforcement and there are others they do not. So, and there are different also layer of collaboration. So there, if service providers collaborate with law enforcement is already an advanced step that can help the investigation. Then there is to understand if the law of the country allows the evidence to be admissible at court with the requirement of only voluntary disclosure. And that is, of course, on a legal problem to understand, speaking about like harmonization of legislation, adapting to the ratifying the existing treaties and convention, etc. There are problems related to where the company is located, because due to the location, private companies have to respond to the law of the countries where they have, of course, their data stored, and it means that then also retention rules and the time of the, so there are definitely a multi-layered problematic and approach. I'm not sure I can respond to this question in the time frame we have. I can definitely answer in a more structured way, but because the question is very complex, and the answer is that, of course, only the voluntary disclosure or the cooperation of a few service provider with some more trusted law enforcement of certain system, etc. It doesn't work. It cannot help the complexity of the crime behind, and it is needed, though, unfortunately, also analyzing type of evidence, type of legislation, type of crime, and if there is the need, I can definitely answer this question in a more complex with a bit more time, but I don't know if now I am able to do so for.
Thank you indeed.
I'm so sorry.
No problems. Digital crime scenes are indeed very complex, and we see that the jurisdiction applicable to the victim, to the data, to the aggressors might be different. So we have a lot of need of cooperation. And so we really need some international instruments to make sure that cooperation among states is smooth with the private
we
sector.
Even have
so
the,
it's
so
really,
there is the need
really
of cooperation
complex.
from all layers, from countries, from providers, from like, yes.
Exactly. Absolutely. Thank you for this. We go into a last question. If you have some time, Afruz, would like to put you a last question. And would you like to highlight maybe the new opportunities that the advancement of the UN Convention Against Cybercrime puts forward for every state in terms of legislation and the protection of children against different forms of cyber criminality?
Yeah, thank you, Renata. And I'm conscious of time, so I'll keep it super short and sweet. I think the new convention is really an important step forward for addressing tech-facilitated trafficking and violence against children. So I'll focus on three things that it gives us. It advances the minimum standards that we have, the international minimum standards for criminalizing child sexual abuse materials and grooming of children for sexual abuse, and the non-consensual distribution of intimate images. So this is critical because before this, we didn't have clear international benchmarks, and so we now have that. Secondly, it's the point you already mentioned. It gives us, the strengthening of the procedural powers and the cooperation, absolutely critical for these laws to be applied. And then the final thing I just wanted to point to is that it also includes victim protections, and it calls out those specific needs of children as well. Obviously, age and gender having to be taken into account in victim protection. And also, I should note, it does make suggestions on prevention. So really important in terms of advancing our minimum benchmarks for this work. Thanks.
Thank you for that. And I would like to extrapolate that to the topic that unites us all today, which is trafficking in persons. And when this crime is cyber enabled, we can also profit from this convention, from the procedural standards, from the measures around protection and assistance of victims, which are so crucial. States tend to cooperate and tend to look for cooperation in terms of investigation, prosecution, extradition, but please, let's also start cooperating in terms of victim protection, witnesses support, and this is something that is so crucial when we're dealing with big networks of trafficking in persons. So thank you for those remarks. We thank you, to all three of you and our first 4 panelists for your time, for your insights. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for putting together so much good information for our audience. As I said at the beginning, the recording of this session will be published on the ICAT website, and the Secretariat will inform all participants as soon as it becomes available. So if you have missed some parts, if you want to look at any others again, this will be possible for you to see. Links are also provided in the web stories, and if you have a specific question for one of the panelists here, please don't hesitate to contact us. You can put the question and it will be also responded privately. Lastly, and respecting the time of everybody, UNODC would like to thank the ICAT members for promoting this webinar series, and the ICAT co-chairs, both our organization and the Organization of American States, as well as the Secretariat for the spearheading of this initiative. We thank you all for the attention, for the time. We hope it has been useful, and we hope to see you soon in the next webinar. Everyone, and good afternoon.